Hey, can I let you in on a little secret? Empowered Mind Christian ICBT for OCD is going on sale for Memorial Day. This is a fully self-help course that you can start immediately to work on your OCD recovery. I have an ICBT workbook that helps you practice each of the skills that you will be learning in the self-help course. And if you want to find out all the latest details, you're going to want to subscribe to our email newsletter by going to carriebach.com. Today, we are talking about the connection between mindfulness and ICBT. And I think that they can have a really great marriage together, but I will talk to you a little bit about why I think that on this episode. Welcome, OCD warriors, to the Christian Faith and OCD podcast, where we are all about reducing shame and stigma of struggling with OCD as a Christian, sharing hopeful stories, and replacing uncertainty with faith as you develop practical tools for greater peace. I'm Carrie Bach, Christ follower, wife, mom, and licensed professional counselor in Tennessee. I pray you are blessed by today's episode. Now, we've talked so much about mindfulness on the podcast. You could go back and search some of the previous episodes. However, I want to give you the brief rundown of mindfulness, the very brief rundown of ICBT, and why I believe these two interventions can go really well together, and how mindfulness can support your ICBT journey, if that's a journey that you are on. Now, mindfulness is different than meditation. A lot of times people will use those interchangeably. Meditation, you have a specific goal that you're trying to work on, and there is such a thing as Christian meditation. You can focus on scriptures, etc. However, what we're doing with mindfulness is really just developing this awareness of the present moment, what's going on in it, not just to build awareness of what we're experiencing in this moment and what's happening around us, but also this acceptance for what's actually here versus trying to avoid it as what we normally do, right? Is like pull away from things that are uncomfortable to us and lean in towards things that feel good, that are comfortable, that we want to engage with. Mindfulness allows you to create some space between you and your thought process, for example. This can be very helpful in terms of dealing with OCD, recognizing like, hey, I'm having an intrusive thought right now. This is something I'm latching onto as part of my identity that I'm bringing in and making meaning out of it. Mindfulness increases what we call distress tolerance. That's your ability to handle difficult situations. It's interesting. I learned so much from working with clients, and I had someone ask me recently, a long time person that I'd been working with, and we made the move to kind of go down this mindfulness path and lean in a little bit more than we had previously. And he says to me, so let's say I become really good at this. Then what? Like, what's the end game here? I'm just going to run around being this person that just lives in the moment. Like, isn't that nice? And I said, that's a great question that you asked me. I had to think about it for just a moment. And then I said, when something difficult happens, when a stressful life situation hits, you're going to be able to pause and you're going to be able to see what's actually going on in that moment that you need to address and deal with versus going into all of these hypotheticals about worst case scenarios, about what could actually happen. For example, you get a difficult test result back from the doctor. Maybe it's something that you don't like, right? Maybe you get some blood work back and it's like, hey, you're in pre-diabetes. You really got to change your lifestyle habits. You got to change your eating habits. Nobody wants that letter, right? There's different ways that people could deal with something like this, right? They completely just try to avoid it and ignore it. Okay, I'm going to bury that letter under some paperwork. I'm going to roll it through the shredder. I'm going to pretend my doctor didn't say that. I'm going to live in this happy place of denial. And then, of course, where does that lead lead you. That leads you to continue to be in a state of unhealth. And people do this with OCD, like, nah, it's probably not OCD. It's probably I'm just a little weird, even though it's causing all these problems in your relationships and in your life. Oh no, it's not a problem. Everything's good. Live in that denial and not actually deal with what's going on. Or the complete opposite extreme, on the other end of the extreme of that is, oh no, so-and-so relative died from complications of diabetes, and now I'm going to be just like them, and I'm just on this path, and it's my destiny and fate. I'm about to die. I mean, just going through all of these worst case scenarios that they could imagine. Could go down a road of, hey, I've got to fix everything and completely overhaul everything that I'm doing, getting like super obsessed about your health. And that lasts for about a week. And then you're in the corner of a closet somewhere eating Oreos, overwhelmed with life. And these are all things that I've seen as ways of people dealing with stress information, right? But what mindfulness allows you to do is it allows you to sit with that test result and say, okay, this is rough right now. Like at a very face value, this is not what I wanted to hear. Maybe I have some shame coming up from past choices. Maybe I do feel anxious about what the future holds. Okay, let me just take a minute to take stock of my actual experience that I'm having with this information right now as I'm taking it in. And then once you can sit with that and say, okay, well, here we are. I can't go back and change the past. There is no point in me freaking out about the future. So this is what practicing really being present is like. It's what's actually going on today. It doesn't mean you never plan for anything, and it doesn't mean that you never evaluate based on past experience. And that's a misnomer that a lot of people have about mindfulness. They think, well, it's just impractical to live in the moment all the time, Carrie. I have to plan for things. Okay, totally fine. I have plans too. Not a problem. I have plans for personal life goals. I have plans for my business. Mindfulness doesn't say don't make plans. Certainly when we found out about Steve's diagnosis, it was like, hey, let's get in a one-story house. That's going to be the best bet for us on a long-term moving forward. Find some place where we can plant down and settle into and not have to worry about like weird split-level stair stuff. Nothing wrong with planning. However, oftentimes what happens is if we spend a lot of time in the future, which many people dealing with OCD do, right? Thinking all these horrible things are going to happen to me, or I am secretly this horrible person and nobody's found out about it yet, but somehow at some point there's going to be some like tipping point, snapping point, whatever you want to call it. And everyone's going to know that I'm this horrible, awful person that hurts other people, which is of course not the reality of what's going on. But if you can recognize that those are futuristic thoughts that OCD is taking you down, and you bring yourself back to, what's actually happening in the present, that can be really helpful. What's actually going on in the here and now? And you're not borrowing this past regret. And that's where really limiting the emotional distress level, because we're only having to deal with the emotions of what's actually happening in the present moment. And knowing that we can sit with reality, it's not going to kill us. It's not always going to feel good. Mindfulness, I think sometimes people are like, oh, I can't relax. I can't calm down. I can't settle. I can't do these things. I'm no good at that kind of stuff. First of all, you're not good at anything you haven't practiced. I can promise you that, unless you just have natural skills and abilities. However, even people with natural skills and abilities go out and practice what they're good at so that they can become better at it. We all need to practice things. That is a lie that we would like to believe, is that we should just automatically be good at things and not have to ever work for it. That's not life, sorry. You can develop these skill sets, which, by the way, society doesn't teach you, because society has us all sorts of distracted in 1,000 different directions, multitasking to the hilt. People even multitask when they relax now. I don't know if you noticed that. It used to be you just sat down and had dinner, but now people sit down, they have dinner in front of the TV while their phone's going off, and then they're trying to answer the text from Aunt Susie, and oh no, I forgot, I have this reminder popping up on my phone about my kid has a school project tomorrow that I didn't buy the Elmer's glue. I mean, just constant distractions and all over the place with our minds. So if we practice slowing down, turning some of that off, just sitting and eating, that is a great mindfulness practice. Just sit and eat. Don't turn on a podcast. Don't turn on the news station. Don't get all distracted by other things, especially if this would benefit your health sometimes, right? Because when we're all sorts of distracted, we end up maybe eating more or not really paying attention to when we're actually full. So just noticing, what is it like to sit with this food? What is it like to smell it, taste it, chew it? What's the texture like? And really enjoying that moment and sinking into it versus being super distracted. That's just one way to practice. You don't have to do that all the time, certainly. There's plenty of times that I eat and do other things. But the point is, if we're always eating and doing other things, we never have this ability to slow down and see what's actually going on with us internally, physically, mentally, emotionally. In mindfulness, you can really look at noticing things without becoming absorbed by them, because with OCD, there's this tendency to just automatically get absorbed in a thought or automatically get absorbed in an emotion or automatically get absorbed in a particular story that your brain is telling you that may or may not be true. So when you create this space of just being curious and kind of noticing what's going on instead of immediately judging, this is something that Christians are really good at, unfortunately, right? We're immediately good at going, bad thought, stop, shut it down, captivate, kick it to the curb. Whereas what we're trying to do with OCD is saying, this is an intrusive thought. I know that it's coming from somewhere. I don't need to latch into it. I don't need to say this means I'm a horrible person because I had this intrusive thought. It just means it's an intrusive thought, and I can learn how to deal with these differently. I can learn to disengage from them and let them pass by. I don't have to latch onto every thought that comes into my mind. I don't have to assume it's from me, the devil, in OCD. I could just say, okay, that's not a thought, that I'm not going to hop on that train today. I'm going to let it move by. One thing I'm seeing more and more that I want to talk about is that oftentimes people with OCD don't have the skills to deal with day-to-day stressors. So if we go to try to take off this layer of OCD and we still don't know how to deal with the stress of relationships, someone's upset at us, someone might be thinking about us sideways, and I'm concerned with that. Dealing with the stress of parenting or being in a marriage or a boss that may not like you. These are all just things that happen on a day-to-day basis. Grief and loss. If we don't know how to deal with these things, then that's going to create problems and is going to create a tendency for you to go back and grab onto that OCD because it's familiar. So if I don't have healthy relationship skills, or if I don't have a healthy way to cope with things that are outside of my control, it's very easy to go into a rumination cycle about, okay, how do I get that person to like me? And maybe if I do this differently with the boss, then that could do that. Or maybe then I'm going into obsessions about the boss and creating this whole type of story that's not real. All of these things I have seen happen, and I don't think that this gets talked about enough in terms of OCD recovery either, because it's just complicated, for lack of a better way to say it. These are not cut and dry, one size fits all type of situations that I'm seeing. I mean, I don't know what other people are seeing. I can't speak to that. But since I've gotten into the OCD world, I have realized how complicated treatment can be. And so cookie cutter approaches are just not going to work for people. You've got to look at, do you have the stress management skills, the distress tolerance skills to be able to handle day-to-day life? And then that's one set of skills that mindfulness can certainly help with. And then do you have the OCD set of skills to be able to deal with the obsessions and compulsions as they arise? Now, those, of course, can work together in terms of mindfulness. I think mindfulness can help you with both sides of that, because mindfulness can help you reduce the distress of what you're experiencing in the present by being able to kind of just take it a little bit more at face value. And it can also help you deal with some of the shame maybe that you're experiencing related to OCD. It can help you become more aware of the things, how OCD shows up. So this is a huge piece of why I believe that mindfulness and ICBT can work together. If you don't know what ICBT is, it stands for Inference-Based Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. And what that does is it really just kind of pulls the curtain back of what's actually going on in OCD, how you get into these obsessional reasoning processes, how the obsessional reasoning process is different from the everyday reasoning process. A lot of this information is mapped out in massive detail in Resolving OCD Volumes 1 and 2, designed to be a little bit more comprehensive than the original ICBT treatment manual, which was skinny, in my opinion, for a treatment manual. The best analogy I have for what ICBT does is that it's a little bit like The Wizard of Oz. If you have ever seen that movie, they go in and it's like this big green guy, like, oh, I am the great and powerful Oz. And it looks super scary, and there's all these lights and smoke coming up. And really, when you pull back the curtain, like there's this little guy in there running the show. And OCD is like that. It causes you to be super scared. It's really loud. It's obnoxious. But once you understand how it operates and you can pull back that curtain, you're like, really, OCD? Like, oh, okay. Like, I don't need to worry about that. You're just making a big deal out of nothing. This is a bunch of smoke and lights. And what's actually happening in the here and now doesn't call for all of that alert, like threat detection and going off. We don't need to engage with you. Like, you're just a little guy back here. That's what OCD does. But if you're not aware or tuned into what they call sense data, then that's going to be really hard to utilize some of that in the ICBT recovery process. If you don't know how OCD shows up for you, like there's this concept called carrier thoughts that really gets you, like, suck you into the imagination that Resolving OCD Volume 2 talks about. So you really have to be able to slow down your thought process enough to identify some of those carrier thoughts that are getting you over into this imagined worst case scenario. It's horrible. It's definitely going to happen versus it's a possibility, like many things are possible in life. And being able to identify some of the thoughts and evidences behind your obsessional doubt that you have. If you practice mindfulness and if you're able to create, like, in a metacognitive way, examine your thought process, it's going to be much easier for you to implement these ICBT skills, because a lot of times people just really don't have that awareness of what justifications even they're using for their OCD. They'll say things like, I don't know, it just could happen and it's really scary and I have to give into it. So being able to slow down, to settle and say, okay, I've been thinking this way for a long time. How did I get here to this point? What's behind all of this? What's behind that curtain? That's why I believe that these two things can go together really well, because it allows you to also deal with the emotions and the body sensations that come up with OCD, which are legitimate. OCD causes things to feel true that aren't true, or to feel real that aren't real. This is addressed as phantom sensations. Once again, if you're going to be like, oh no, it's a great and powerful Oz. Oh no, it's really scary. But as you go through this process, it may still be scary at times, like, oh, that obsession is still scary, but I understand why the fear is there. I understand why the urgency is there now. I have greater awareness of how to disengage and trust that those feelings and those body sensations are going to dissipate as I disengage, like, from this obsessional reasoning process. And how can I get back to what is actually going on in the here and now? So there's internal sense data, like your emotions, your body sensations, your true desires, your intentions, like your heart process, and also external senses, like, are my hands actually clean? Can I look at my hands and see, okay, there's no dirt on them? I know I just washed them. I used soap. I did a typical hand washing routine, but OCD says, oh no, but your hands are still sticky, or there may be germs on them that you can't see. So then you feel like unclean in some way, shape, form, and you go back and wash your hands versus saying, you know what, they may not feel clean, but I know, like, looking at them, smelling them, etc., they are clean. I can move forward with the rest of my day-to-day life. I think the Christian integration of all of this is that God has given us sense data. God can reveal to us what the true desires of our hearts are. God knows our heart better than anyone else does. Also, there's lots of things in the scripture that talk about be still and know that I am God. There's a verse that says in James, life is but a vapor. And many of you are saying, hey, next week or next month, I'm going to do this or that. But no one really knows how long we have. And that's where, yes, planning for the future is not bad, but we also are somewhat instructed to live day by day, to ask God for our daily bread, that there is a time and season and a purpose for everything under heaven. So learning to be with God, to be present, is a practice that many of us, unfortunately, are not learning in Christian churches unless you're coming from a very contemplative type of faith. We're all about head knowledge sometimes, and we've amassed a large amount of head knowledge, but it never gets down to our heart and never sinks in to practice. Once again, these are things that you have to practice. Just sit with God sometime and see what that is like for you. Is that thought super uncomfortable? What is it like to be in this moment and know that God is here with me? Maybe something that feels positive for you, and it may not, depending on your background and your beliefs about God or things that you have been taught, things maybe that OCD has convinced you of about God. I want you to know that we have this program called Empowered Mind, and it hardly ever goes on sale, but it is going on sale for Memorial Day. Hop on our email list, carriebach.com, to subscribe to the newsletter, and you can find out more about that. This is a Christian integration of ICBT, and I have thrown a lot of mindfulness skills in there as well. We have a mindfulness practice for each of the 12 weeks. I've also included workbook pages that we've created of other ways to practice mindfulness in your day-to-day life. That workbook is going to be out as a standalone product as well for the first time. And I'm so excited about that because I have applied these principles specifically in terms of the real self and who God has created you to be, and how you can kind of look at some of these materials through a Christian lens. The workbook itself is not designed to be comprehensive. It's designed to be taken with the course, but it may help you if you are already seeing an ICBT therapist, or if you are an ICBT therapist that's working with a lot of Christians and wanting to incorporate biblical materials with your clients. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I hope that you will join us next week for another episode on Christian faith and OCD. Until next time, may you be comforted by God's great love for you. Christian Faith and OCD is a production of By the Well Counseling. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be a substitute for seeking mental health treatment in your area.